So I'm on like 10 milligrams of dexamethasone. Do you guys know what that is? It's 40 times more powerful than cortisol, milligram per milligram. I've been sick for the past few days. So my throat is not working at the moment. However, this temporarily allows my body to work. So I can talk for an hour. If I talk for too much, this is gonna start bleeding, I'm gonna need surgery. 1 hour's all I got. It's funny because this is the densest presentation of the entire conference. It's like 70 slides or some shit. But yeah, I'm gonna give you a deep dive on every single steroid, peptide, not the bullshit ones, all the protocols you can use to enhance your fitness to become superhuman. So in terms of what I do, I basically put people on steroids to make them live longer. It sounds like an oxymoron, but people don't understand steroids and they don't understand life extension. So, you learn in a second why that's not really an oxymoron. And experience-wise and who I am, I've been doing this for like 12 years at this point. So I turned my bedroom into a biohacking lab at 14. Started coaching CEOs at 17, became a scientist after, and we're building the intelligence layer for enhancement today. Okay, let's hope my voice works for the rest of this. All right, so what we're gonna dive into is a deep dive on all the protocols around drugs and steroids and things of the sort that you can use, men and women, to help you enhance your physiology. We're only gonna cover what works and what is effective. None of the bullshit. There's a lot of bullshit. How you doing? There's more people. Hello. Enjoy.
There is a lot of bullshit, I agree.
Yes. There are more people trickling in. Okay, for the YouTube, my voice is gone. Yes, another person. How you doing, man?
Oh.
Come. Yeah, for the three of you, so my voice is shot, but I took dexamethasone, so it's gonna work for an hour. And then I'm done. You can see this slide for a bit of a background thing if you want, so I'm not a con artist, but otherwise. Anyways, we're only gonna cover what works and what is effective, and the protocols actually come from bodybuilding and sports, except they've been repurposed for longevity, in the sense that we're not focused on competition, we're focused on basically getting to the point where you can replicate all these results with the same drugs, but the protocols are a little bit different. So first, what is longevity is a pretty big thing to cover because most people don't really know how to kind of think about this. I like to think about it in two ways. There's functional capacity, which is when you're 90, does your dick work? Does your muscle work? Does can you move? Can you hold your children? Like, that's what matters. Can you actually do what you want to do when you're 90 years old? Or are you old, frail, and sick in a hospital, right? So extending functional capacity is really a function of fitness and physical fitness. But that is not life extension. Life extension is extending regenerative capacity because at some point, no matter how high your functional capacity is, your cells just don't regenerate as well as they did when you were 20. So true life extension targets regenerative capacity. Everything we're talking about today targets functional capacity. And if a drug worsens your functional capacity, but doesn't extend your regenerative capacity, it's bullshit. Biggest example of that is rapamycin. Nonsense drug, does not work for longevity. Every single trial done on rapamycin, metformin, these longevity drugs, they worsen physical fitness. They don't really have any data in humans to show life extension. Mechanistically, it's kind of like weak. But either way, for functional capacity, we're gonna cover muscle and strength, cardiovascular endurance. I'm going to cover bone and connective tissue, so you can keep that high as you age, and adiposity. For the last one, you might think we're just going to talk about GLP-1s or not. There are other vectors to think about there. Muscle and strength is going to be the biggest one to talk about here because the drugs are more, there are more drugs to use here. And again, I'm not going to talk about every steroid. I'm just going to talk about what actually works and what you should focus on. So this is not a bodybuilder type of rundown because they use a magnitude of different stuff. Okay. Pillar one, get jacked or die trying. Bigger muscles typically correlates to better health up to a point. If you are at bodybuilder levels of muscle mass, that's typically not very healthy. You're about 100 to 150 pounds more muscle than you can naturally maintain. That's a strain on your heart and basically every system in the body. You get some metabolic benefits. Generally speaking, diminishing returns at that point. Being very under-muscled is also not very good. Think about your grandparents who are very frail when they're 80 years old. Generally speaking, not the best thing. The Goldilocks zone is somewhere in the middle. I would argue it's basically whatever your natural limit is. So if you can maintain a level of muscle mass as much as you can maintain naturally, probably the best. No empirical data to support that claim. It's just, hypothesis. If you're wondering why muscle matters, insulin sensitivity is one thing, cognition is another thing, bone density is another thing, better cardiovascular health generally, better trauma resilience. If you ever get sick, all-cause mortality drops. If you get into a car accident, muscle is protective. If you get hospitalized when you're 80, having a buffer of muscle, you're going to lose muscle in the hospital every single day. You're just sedentary. Having a buffer of muscle means that you don't atrophy to the point where it becomes detrimental. And you also get to take advantage of satellite cells. So if you build a ton of muscle when you're 20, we don't know how long muscle memory exists, but it's very real in the sense that you have higher myonuclei. Those produce more proteins. And so if you train again when you're 80 years old, don't know how long this exists, you generally build muscle faster. You can go ahead and maintain muscle easier if you build it when you're young. So, best time to start building muscle is as early as possible.
Sure.
And in order to make muscle big, you have 3 drug pathways you can take advantage of. The first is the androgenic pathway. This is testosterone's pathway. This is the most powerful. It's also masculinizing, so generally not good for women unless you want to be a man. And the worst side effects typically come from the androgenic pathway. And then you have IGF-1. So IGF-1 is what growth hormone targets. And it's mildly effective. It's very anabolic. It's not just anabolic to muscle. It's anabolic to the entire system. It's effective, but it's very unsafe at high doses. So if you want to get bodybuilder jacked, they take about close to 6 to 8 times the amount of growth hormone the average person produces, which produces an insane increase in IGF-1. That's where you start to see bubble gut and acromegaly and permanent organ enlargement, permanent musculoskeletal changes. That's not what you want, unless you want to compete on stage. But at lower doses, we're talking about maybe 2x what the natural human produces. You get a bump in regenerative capacity, a bump in IGF-1, a protective effect of muscle in a calorie deficit. That is generally very mild and very powerful, just not appropriate for cancer patients because IGF-1 is going to accelerate cancer in a lot of cases. Then you have myostatin, which is a protein that inhibits muscle mass. If you inhibit myostatin, you get more muscle. It's specific to, it targets all muscle, so we're talking about the heart as well. Potentially the best pathway out there, but there's never been a drug commercialized for this yet. That's about to change. This is appropriate for women, and the first myostatin drugs will be coming within the next 5 years. I'll speak more of that in a second. So one thing to note is that not all steroids are bad. Steroids exist on a spectrum of dozens of compounds.
Right, definitely.
So in the middle, you have testosterone. That's like baseline. Very androgenic, very anabolic. Androgenic basically means masculinizing. That's where you talk about hair loss side effects, acne side effects, masculinizing side effects. Anabolic means building muscle.
I would rate.
Generally, the best drugs are highly anabolic, lowly androgenic, because the androgenic side effects, that's what gets you. On the lower end of the spectrum, you have certain SARMs, certain oral steroids, and even some injectable steroids that are that have lower androgenicity than testosterone, but higher or equivalent, in some cases, lower anabolic potential as testosterone. Those drugs are generally very safe. In some cases, they're not, but I'll get into that in a second. On the higher end, this is kind of the threshold for what a bodybuilder would take. On the higher end, you have drugs that are way more powerful, way more anabolic or androgenic than testosterone, and that's what you use to compete on stage. Typically, you're using multiple drugs in a combination, which increases your total androgenic load. This is why bodybuilders start to, really get sick and get a bunch of negative side effects. You should only really focus on here and below. You go above that, you're kind of just, eroding your health in some way, shape, or form. You can experiment with these things. I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, so what makes a cycle, and a cycle is basically a period of time where you take an androgen dangerous, is really 3 vectors. What drug are you taking? Really, how androgenic is it? What's the dose? Obviously, lower dose, lower negative effects. And how long are you taking it? Testosterone, for example, is suppressive to your natural testosterone production as a man. For women, this doesn't matter as much because you already have very low testosterone. You're not going to be augmenting with a ton of testosterone in the first place. However, the total load of androgens in your system is what really creates negative effects on a cycle. If you keep your androgenic load low with safe drugs, low doses, controlled durations, you can get away with building a ton of muscle without any permanent side effects if you have clinical monitoring in place. If you go above that, bodybuilders typically take gear year-round at varying doses. They're balancing multiple drugs at once, and they're on very highly androgenic drugs at the same time. The load of androgens in their system is so high that they're building 100 to 150 pounds more muscle than they can maintain naturally. And you're never going to get that big if you use safe cycling, but you will get that big if you want to be a bodybuilder. So I just need to clarify, steroids have a terrible reputation. It's deserved within abuse cases, but there's a therapeutic window here that you can use for longevity. That's what we're going to cover. The ceiling for a longevity cycle is 500 milligrams of testosterone per week for a man. For a woman, it's a little bit different. That dose level is the first steroid cycle you would ever run in bodybuilding. So the floor for bodybuilding is the ceiling for longevity, just to give you more context. Any questions? Okay, awesome.
I guess one question I had, and maybe we'll talk about it later, is that some of these drugs, once you start taking them, apparently if you start taking
Can you say that one more time?
testosterone, you cannot get off it.
That's not true. I'll go into that in a second.
Yeah. Well,
1 second. Hi, everybody. So my voice is gone. I'm on 10 milligrams of dexamethasone, so I can speak for an hour, then I got to shut up. You've missed the first part of the presentation. Core things you got to note. Muscle good. Muscle means better health. Bodybuilder muscle means bad health. Goldilocks zone somewhere in the middle of old man and bodybuilder. And steroids are therapeutic if you use them properly. They exist on a spectrum. However, abuse of steroids is bad. The zone where it's good is testosterone and below. Core points so far. You guys missed the rest, but I have a recording, and I'll put it up later. What's up, man?
What's like the typical range of testosterone? The middle-aged person.
I'm going to give you some numbers in a second. Yeah. So the bodybuilders die early. Again, I'm going to repeat this because you guys are here. Balance multiple drugs, take them year-round, very androgenic drugs, and they never go off. They build an insane amount of muscle. The longevity way to do this is to cycle for about 3 months. Come back, man. What are you doing? Okay. Cycle for about 3 months, or you do what's called a perpetual cruise. We'll get into that in a second. You control the cycle. You monitor all of your markers, cholesterol, hematocrit, liver enzymes, and all that stuff. You keep them in range over time, and you titrate down if they go off. You do this, you completely cycle off, so you maintain the amount of muscle you built, and you focus on having natural testosterone take care of the work, and you get reasonably more jacked than the average person. Not so jacked that you become, monkey or gorilla or whatever the hell it is. Anyways, so the 3 rules before I get into the actual drugs you would take for women as well. I have a few things that will work for you. 3 rules to use anabolics without dying. You never use something without a justification, which means if you've never been in a gym, don't take gear. Get your ass in the gym. If you don't eat high protein, eat more protein, right? Like, train for about 2 years properly. If you need to boost protein, I don't know, do whatever the hell you need to get enough protein and train properly and learn the basics first before you take a drug. The drugs are generally something that amplify, are you looking at the boof word? It's when you take a drug up your butt.
Does that help?
No, it's a joke. You've never boofed ketamine?
I've not.
Okay, yeah, I haven't either, just checking. Anyways, it's just, Bay Area, I figured you guys would get this. Anyways, never been in a gym, get your ass in the gym, learn proper training. You want at least 2 years of actual consistent training. And then the next thing is if you don't have a reason to actually use the drug, in the sense that you're not losing muscle on a cut, or you don't actually need something to amplify muscle gain, you have enough muscle, there's really no reason to use these things unless you actually have a justification. So the next thing is you never want to unnecessarily rely on something. The rule of thumb to make sure you have enough muscle that doesn't, actually, that's the next point. Never mind. You don't want to rely on a drug to build muscle. You should be able to build muscle naturally, not just with drugs. And the third thing is you want to build what you can maintain naturally. So if you, again, take it too far, that's where the negative effects start to happen. If you can build enough muscle on a cycle, then maintain as much of that as possible naturally, heuristically you're probably good. Empirically, we don't know what the actual threshold for muscle is, but heuristically you're probably fine. Any questions before I move on to the actual drugs? Okay, good.
Just one question.
Yes.
So you're saying so you went, the first one was testosterone low, so clinical testosterone, especially as you get to the, is okay.
Yeah.
If you're working out a lot and you want to cycle that last one, are you saying it's cycling low dose anabolics to add muscle? If you're doing all the other things, increase protein, all that to jump muscle, because you do jump a bunch of muscle, as long as you cycle and you're doing it, running all your markers is still okay?
Well, we're about to go into protocol. Yeah.
Yes, good.
Hopefully my throat doesn't bleed in between this. Anyways, okay, the androgenic ladder. So there's levels to what you would take and what you would start with. So the first thing, this is the first two are for men, the third is for women. First thing is just enclomiphene. Do you guys know what enclomiphene is? Okay, one person. So it's actually an FDA-approved drug for fertility in women. If women take this, it's not going to do anything for muscle. In men, what it does is it blocks estrogen's inhibiting effect of testosterone. So testosterone produces estrogen in the male body, and then estrogen blunts testosterone production. And clomiphene blocks that blunting, which means you just build, or you just produce more testosterone naturally. Now, the traditional typical man, let's say on average, has 500 milligrams of 500 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone in his body. And clomiphene alone, dose of 6.5 to 12.5 milligrams per day, gets you to about 1,000. So roughly a doubling of the amount of testosterone you produce. Even if you're clinically hypogonadal, people typically get up to about 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. Now, for context, the threshold in men for when testosterone gets bad for you, where the negative side effects start to creep up, roughly between 1,200 to 1,500 nanograms per deciliter. I would argue the higher end, but you can do clinical monitoring yourself and figure out what's bad. So the next thing is you take enclomiphene and oral testosterone. You could take pills that compound testosterone. It's a very low bioavailability, but if you take it every day with fat, you get enough in your bloodstream to raise the amount of testosterone in your system to about 1,500 nanograms per deciliter. And you do that without suppressing your natural testosterone production, because enclomiphene continues to protect your natural ability to produce testosterone. Your fertility doesn't go down, everything is fine. That's a slight boost. None of these things are steroid cycles. They're starters for what higher testosterone feels like, so you can monitor how your body responds to these protocols and how you're building muscle. These things are basically TRT replacements, very safe to take long term. There isn't a ton of long-term data, but if you're taking this for 1 to 2 years at a time, there's enough data to say this is perfectly fine. Mildest thing you're going to see on this list. Now, for women, a starter is ostarine or oxandrolone. These are oral steroids. So oral steroids, you don't inject them, you just take them as a pill. Ostarine is a selective androgen receptor modulator. It's more selective to muscle tissue and less selective to all the other tissues in your body, which means you're getting a mild anabolic effect. It's currently in clinical trials with a GLP-1 combo therapy to preserve muscle mass at low doses. And this is a drug that's not going to really masculinize you. It's not a very powerful anabolic, but it aids in lean mass preservation, and it aids in increasing rate of muscle protein synthesis on a cycle. As a man, any oral steroid you take is going to suppress your testosterone production. As a woman, you don't have that much testosterone to begin with, it doesn't really matter. If you need a tiny amount of testosterone replacement therapy, you take a little cream, put it on a lot of people put it on their clitoris actually, because it helps with libido, or you put it on your skin, whatever you want. You can do that as a testosterone base, but the oral steroids are generally going to be the first line. That said, oral steroids come with liver enzyme elevation. They're harsh on your liver. If you're not an alcoholic, you're probably going to be fine. If you're obese or if you're an alcoholic and you just don't have a good liver to begin with, you don't want to have that additional stress. But if you're already starting from a healthy baseline, the oral steroids, they just produce an uptick for a few months. They go back down immediately. And they can have some negative effect on your HDL and LDL levels. But again, this is like temporary. So if you're starting from a healthy baseline, it gets out of whack for a few months and then it goes back down, which is why cycling becomes important. Any questions from the 4 women in the room?
So can you go off the you watch out products?
So Did I put a slide about PCT in here? I'm going to cover PCT in a second, but you do need to cycle off and then recover your testosterone production. For both men and women, you got to recover. And I think I have a slide in here for that. So oxandrolone is another oral anabolic steroid called Anabar. This is FDA approved, clinically indicated. This also works for women. It's more masculinizing, but way less masculinizing than testosterone. You take a low dose of about 10 milligrams per day, maybe up to 20 milligrams per day. This is a proper steroid cycle. It's very anabolic. You will build a lot more muscle. Liver enzymes might get a little bit out of whack, but this actually it's one of the better studied drugs out there, more than ostarine. It's just a little bit powerful, so I wouldn't start with this. And again, with any oral steroid, liver enzyme elevation, cholesterol elevation, those things are things you have to take care of. Now, after that point, oxandrolone can also be used for men. This is actually pretty good if you're on a calorie deficit and you want to preserve muscle mass while you're on the calorie deficit, which we'll get to in the last section. But if you're now ready to actually get into gear, Anabar is like a baby steroid. Now you get on testosterone. And testosterone, the first dose you take, which is half of what a bodybuilder takes, is 200 to 300 milligrams of testosterone per week. So, like I said before, the average man produces 500 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone. Taking 300 milligrams of testosterone per week personally gets me to 17,050 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone in my bloodstream. I did my own cycle for 6 months. I have data, interval by interval, on how my training volume changed, how my muscle mass level changed, how my fat mass level changed. It's on my Twitter. You can see it in depth if you'd like. But 1750 nanograms per deciliter, very anabolic. The side effects of hair loss or acne or high blood pressure or hematocrit elevation don't really present that much at this dose, and it's very easy to catch. It's possible, but this is kind of like a safe starting elevation beyond the threshold of about 1,500 nanograms per deciliter, where you start to see negative effects. You run that protocol for 3 months. You build a lot of muscle tissue. You're probably going to put on 8 to 10 pounds of lean mass at minimum. At least about 70% of that will be muscle tissue. At least 30% of that will be water and glycogen. That right there is perfect starter protocol. And if you take it with HCG, your fertility keeps working. Like your balls keep producing sperm effectively. If you take exogenous testosterone without HCG, you don't come at all because your body just doesn't produce any sperm. But with HCG, all that is preserved. That's a fertility drug. This is what people who don't produce sperm take to produce more sperm. Any questions before I move on to the last slide?
Yeah. So very basic questions.
Yeah.
Even if I take HCG, what about the situation? Does it still then basically produce the right amount when you start off performance?
Produce the right amount of testosterone?
A lot of testosterone. I mean, what's like?
Of like LH, FSH?
Yeah.
No. So HCG is a mimetic of LH or FSH. It's basically, it's LH or FSH specifically for your testicles. So it increases intratesticular testosterone, and your serum LH and FSH, which is the fertility markers, those drop to like 0.
Does it take for them to?
Depending on the drugs you take after, it's about a month. If you don't take the drugs after, it's about 2 months. If you take PCT after, it's about a month.
Okay. Can you give more detail on the mechanism of orgasm interruption that you described?
You don't interrupt orgasm, you just don't come.
I see.
Yeah. So you can orgasm,
You're not producing sperm.
but you're not going to ejaculate, which, if you have a breeding kink like I do, is probably not a good thing. Any other questions?
On the testosterone HCG combination, 1 day a week, 2 day a week, 3 day a week, split up?
2 doses a week of 250 IUs, taken subcutaneously in your belly fat.
That's what I read.
Yep.
You can theoretically do it every day at smaller doses, all perfectly fine. Yeah. Okay. Now this is the ceiling. Don't go beyond this. 500 milligrams of testosterone a week. That is a starter, proper, complete bodybuilding steroid cycle. Bodybuilders start with that. You would want to end with that. You go beyond that, you just get all the negative side effects bodybuilders deal with. That is a very powerful cycle. You will build a ton of muscle very quickly. You will feel amazing. I'll go into more benefits in a second, But you'll feel amazing. You'll build a ton of muscle very quickly. However, the risk of hematocrit elevation rises. Hematocrit is what makes your blood thick. If your blood gets too thick, you get blood clots. You can monitor this with a CBC. It costs $6. Very easy. Cholesterol might get a little bit disrupted. You'll see. In most people, it doesn't. It's mostly the oral steroids that have cholesterol disrupting effects. But at that dose, the other thing is if you're susceptible to hair loss, you're probably going to lose a lot of hair. There are ways to ameliorate that with dutasteride on your scalp or orally, but it's a little bit finicky. Just know you're probably going to lose some hair on that cycle. The hormone fluctuations can also cause acne, specifically not on the drug when you get off the drug because your testosterone tanks to 0 and your body just deals with this insane fluctuation. So that's another thing you might have to monitor. Non-exhaustive blood pressure also might rise. Again, with proper clinical monitoring in place, you can catch all of these things early. I would do that cycle for 2 to 3 months. Probably 3 months is the best number. You build a ton of muscle in a compressed amount of time. If you monitor all the negative side effects, when you get off, if you get off properly, no long-term side effects persist for most cases. I would say 99% of cases. Now, if you take this for too long, or you do this too much, or your body just doesn't tolerate the drug properly, there are cases where you might have negative effects. But, that's the ceiling of what you want to do. Now, for context, this is not something I think any of you are ever going to have to do, but the one level above this is you take a drug called primobolan or masteron. So these are anabolic steroids. They are as anabolic as testosterone, less androgenic in the sense that they have less of these masculinizing effects. If you want to go beyond what testosterone does, you take a combination of testosterone, about 200 milligrams or so of testosterone to keep all the functions of testosterone in the system. Then you add 400, 500, 600 milligrams of primobolan or masteron in your same syringe, because that allows you to get more anabolic effect without the androgenic effects of testosterone, and allows you to get above the 500 milligram threshold, which builds you more muscle without negative side effects. So that's the steroid protocol that a bodybuilder would run after testosterone. I don't think any of you would ever need to do that, but this is really just a way for you to get more androgenic load without side effects. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So let me get off that dose. Will the gains persist, or do we see some loss of that?
You see some losses. So the gains are a combination of muscle, lean water, and glycogen. You're going to lose water and glycogen after the cycle for sure. So a few pounds are going to be gone. With proper training, you can maintain a lot of the muscle that you build with proper post-cycle therapy. I could tell you for my 500 milligram testosterone cycle, I built 18 pounds of lean mass in 2 months, 10 weeks.
Your 500 milligram cycle.
I built 18 pounds of muscle in 10 weeks. 2 months later, after full recovery, I had gained 11 pounds of lean mass permanently. That's 7 pounds. Don't know how much of it was muscle loss. Don't know how much of it was lean body water, but lots of that persisted.
Did you notice any differences then?
Right after the drug, right after I got off the drug, for that 1 month, I was very weak. My training plateaued, but as my body produced more testosterone with enclomiphene, that's what you do for post-cycle therapy. Everything came back. I'm back at 100%.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do they track PSA in people that there is
Levels still help.
I think it's wise. I think it's wiser as you get older. But yeah, it's probably wise. Okay. So androgen benefits. We've gone through the drug protocols. The person that just walked in missed the bulk of the drug protocols, but okay. Anyways, the benefit, you make muscle big fast, obviously. Second benefit is drive, energy, vitality, strength, all that goes up. Faster recovery, faster wound healing. When I analyzed my data, I noticed that on testosterone, my training volume skyrocketed. So I was able to just train way more, which correlated 1-to-1 with the amount of muscle I built on that cycle. So like month-to-month intervals, one interval I'd build 4 pounds of muscle, 10 pounds of muscle the next. 1-to-1 correlation with my training volume increasing of the lean mass gain. Strengthens bones as well, and for men, you typically get laid more. Speaking from experience, I don't know what the hell it is. When I was on 500 milligrams of test, I would just stand somewhere and then people would jump on me. Very fun. Drawbacks, also non-exhaustive. Women taking testosterone turn into men. Not literally, but if you want a mustache, I don't know, go ahead. And the longer you suppress your testosterone production, the longer it takes to recover it. So the more of your life you are suppressing your testosterone production with an exogenous testosterone drug, it takes longer to recover it. And some people, particularly bodybuilders, I don't think this happens if you're in the longevity zone, never fully recover, which puts them on lifelong TRT. So to speak to your question earlier, if you take a drug and then you do post-cycle therapy, I think I forgot to put the slide in here, so I'll cover it now. Post-cycle therapy is what you do to recover your testosterone levels after. Once you get off testosterone for 2 weeks, because it's an ester that lasts for 7 days in your system, testosterone enanthate or cypionate, that's the drug you want to take. For 2 weeks, it's like still in your system and your body just trickles all the way down to 0. At that point, the hormonal fluctuation can produce a ton of acne and a lot of weakness. You generally feel like shit. After 2 weeks off the drug, you take a drug called enclomiphene. That was the first part of the ladder before. And that starts to kickstart your natural testosterone production again. So for 4 weeks, up to 8 weeks of enclomiphene after you do the cycle, your testosterone levels will naturally rise and it'll get back to baseline, but there's a trough of your energy and of your drive and all that stuff after the drug is taken.
Okay.
So you can almost certainly recover all of your testosterone levels back to baseline with proper recovery. If you're taking these things wisely, if you're taking too much, it's a different situation. But the body's very resilient with these things. The younger you are, the lower the risk. So I'm not really worried about getting on lifelong TRT, to answer your question. If you're on HCG while on the drugs, you're infertile. If you're not on HCG without drugs, you're infertile. So that's one thing to worry about. And obviously the hair loss, blood pressure, hematocrit elevation, those are things you have to worry about and monitor with monthly blood testing. And some cases, especially with oral steroids, lipids and liver enzymes elevate, and you have to monitor that as well. Any questions? Okay, so my Twitter is there. I have a full thread detailing every single thing that happened to my body on 300 to 500 milligrams of testosterone. Training volume increase, protein intake, my calorie intake, liver enzyme elevation, hematocrit, my testosterone levels. On 500 milligrams of testosterone, my circulating blood testosterone was 3,500 nanograms per deciliter, 7 times what the average man produces. Free testosterone levels in a typical man is about 100 picograms per milliliter. My free testosterone was about 1,000 picograms per milliliter on 500 milligrams of testosterone per week. So 10 times the bioavailable testosterone in my body working at 500 milligrams of test for in this case, a 2-month cycle, total of 6 months, 3 months on 300 and then 2.5 months on 500 basically. Yeah, and on 500 milligrams, that's 18 pounds of lean mass gained in 10 weeks. It works. Okay. Yes.
You test, if you're doing 2 day a week, are you testing the morning of the, where you're gonna take it? Stir. Lowest, is that the lowest level that it is before you take it again? Because obviously it spikes when you take it.
So I don't do 2 days a week, I do every day.
You do every day, okay.
I'm gonna take you into that in a second.
Yep.
So the next thing, and by the way, this is the longest section in the presentation, so we'll go to the other ones faster. Growth hormone, IGF-1 drugs. You have anabolic steroids. Now, IGF-1 is the next vector to optimize. So growth hormone on its own is not anabolic, but it downstream leads to the production of IGF-1. IGF-1 is a very anabolic hormone. It's anabolic not just to muscle, but to all tissues in the body. Hence why if you have too much, cancer can grow, your bone structure can change permanently in some cases, your organs can enlarge, which is why I don't think anybody should take high-dose growth hormone or high-dose IGF-1. Bodybuilders do it, but I think IGF-1 drugs shine as mild regenerative agents, and I'll get to the drug dosing in a second. So the safe range is significantly smaller than what bodybuilders take. If you take the safe range, you can augment beyond what you have right now and get recovery benefits for years on end because growth hormone does not fuck with your natural production at all. So the ladder for IGF-1, you start with 2 peptides, ceramorelin or tesamorelin. These are peptides that increase your body's natural production of growth hormone.
Now,
There are many other growth hormone peptides like CJC with DAC, ibutamorin, which is an oral supplement you take. There are many of these other drugs. Don't take them. Don't waste your time. The people who recommend these things have zero fucking clue what they're talking about. These two are very safe, very effective, clinically studied. It just works. You can experiment with the other shit, but you'd be listening to charlatans who don't know what they're talking about. So sermorelin increases growth hormone, and it increases it quite significantly, but it doesn't reliably increase IGF-1. Some people you'll see the IGF-1 increase, and some people you don't. The benefits of growth hormone are typically higher regeneration, better fat partitioning in the sense that if you're on a calorie deficit, you lose more fat and you lose less muscle in some cases, better skin, better joints, better recovery, and the IGF-1 benefits are all the anabolic effects. Testosterone, on the other hand, which is harder to get your hands on because it's a biologic to the FDA, so compounding pharmacies, it's harder to get it through them. That will reliably increase IGF-1. It is FDA approved for that indication in HIV patients. That is going to definitely increase your IGF-1, and it takes it to the upper end of whatever your natural range is. Now, the next step of the ladder is to take straight growth hormone at 2 to 4 IUs nightly. If you're in your 20s, you're probably producing about 1 IU of growth hormone every single night or every single day. If you're in your 40s, it's probably about 0.5. So 2 to 4 IUs gets you about 2x your natural production of growth hormone in your 20s, and about 4x in your 40s at the minimum, somewhere around there. So it's a nice bump in growth hormone, but it's not to the range where the bodybuilders take, which is about 12 IUs, 16 IUs, or whatever, which leads to all the negative effects. As a result, it's also not super strong, but it works very well and you can take it long term. A lot of people talk about BPC 157 or TB 500 for like wound regeneration. Growth hormone taken over a year at 4 IUs nightly beats all of that. Like, it's just way better. Joints, tendons, ligament recovery is just way better, but you have to take it for like a year to get those benefits. It compounds over time. Drawback is that growth hormone is very hard to get. I recently moved to Bali, where it's 10x cheaper. In the US, they have a lot of regulations because the people in this country are idiots, typically. Sorry. But you can't get growth hormone very easily over here, but you can find underground labs that synthesize it. It's just a little bit of a risk to get it there. Now, if you want to get an increase, you can take higher doses, but I don't recommend it. I think 4 IUs per night is the ceiling no matter what your age is. And growth hormone also works for women. It's like no androgenic effects at all. It's, perfectly fine. And taking growth hormone does not suppress your natural growth hormone production in the sense that you can take it, you still produce growth hormone the next day as soon as you get off it. Any questions on GH?
There is no. Why? So for testosterone, there's suppression effects. Why doesn't IGF suppress?
It deals with the feedback loop. Your pituitary does a calculation at night, how much growth hormone do I produce, depending on how much is in your system. If you already have a certain amount in your system, it's like, I don't need to produce more. The next night, there's not a lot. It's like, I need to produce more tonight. That's it. With testosterone, the axis there just takes longer, like the time horizons are longer. So it's like weeks on end of testicular suppression. It takes weeks to recover. So it's just different axes.
We were trying to use the audience for the cyclone on GH for 3 months or whatever. Do you do a 5 day on, 2 day off to give your body recovery cycle?
Well, you don't need to do 5 day on, 2 day off because there's no negative effect to your recovery. Like, it just comes, if you take it for a year, it comes back within 3 days, right? So you can do that if you want. You don't have to. And cycling for growth hormone at the low doses I'm recommending, you can do it if you want to accelerate lean mass partitioning in a cut, we'll get into that in a second, or accelerate gains on a bulk. But the benefits of growth hormone compound over 6+ months for all the recovery stuff. So it's honestly better to just take it for like a year and get all the benefits in a training program versus 3 months off, 3 months on, that kind of thing.
So does it also accelerate the growth of some unwanted things in our body apart from the recovery things that we do want to grow?
Yeah,
some undynamic comes.
Yeah, so IGF-1 non-specific increase in growth throughout the body, right? If you get it to the ranges that 4 IUs of growth hormone will take you, it's upper end of your natural range, maybe a little bit higher. That's generally not going to be super dangerous. If you take it at bodybuilder doses, then it gets even more dangerous. But the key thing to note is that if you have cancer, it's going to accelerate cancer. It doesn't cause cancer, but it'll accelerate it. So the risk is generally younger when you're young. But if you don't have proper cancer screening in place, you might want to, like, MRI, Grail test, regular blood work, you're good.
I think Joe Rogan takes IGF-1, maybe. And I've heard that those who take IGF-1, they have like a very special structure of a gut. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, that happens at like 16 IUs per day. So ceiling for what I recommend you take is 4 IUs per day. 4 times that over a long period of time combined with insulin. So bodybuilders don't just take growth hormone, they take growth hormone and insulin to pump all the nutrients into your muscles to build more muscle. That causes bubble gut. 4 IUs of growth hormone per night will not do any of that. It's nowhere near as powerful. Yeah, so again, the dose ranges are very different. Same with steroids, same with growth hormone.
Please.
I answer your question? Okay. So the benefits of GH is fat partitioning. That's the real main benefit here. If you've ever been on a cut and you don't do regular DEXA scans, you might not know how much muscle you're losing. But basically there's 2 kind of mechanisms here. When you take growth hormone, it increases the amount of free fatty acids you produce. When you have more free fatty acids in your bloodstream, your body has less of a reason to burn muscle during training, during any state. So when you're fasted, you have more FFAs in your bloodstream that protects you against burning muscle. But the chronic lean mass partitioning effect comes from IGF-1, where IGF-1 is protective towards muscle tissue. And so your body just has less of a reason to burn it. When you're in a calorie deficit, there's a lot of studies on this. Your body will burn more fat and less lean mass while you're on GH. This is why GH and GLP-1 is a great combination. You take growth hormone, you take GLP-1, you generally speaking lose less lean mass. The problem is, I guess pharma just can't really commercialize this. There's really unnecessary regulations around growth hormone and erythropoietin itself. These 2 drugs, outside of anabolic steroids, I'll get to that in a second, but they're very powerful doping drugs. 2 of the best protocols here. The next thing is you get better recovery, so you can train way harder. Your joints, ligaments, tendons, all that recover way faster. And those benefits, again, compound over a year. So if you have lingering injuries, you can waste your time with BBC 157. You can waste your time with TB 500, which have no clinical data on them, by the way, in humans. Or you could take growth hormone for a year and get the same benefits, actually better benefits. Just saying. It's also non-suppressive, as I covered before. Drawbacks, carpal tunnel happens in the acute. So you might wake up, your hands are like harder to squeeze. Your feet are harder to squeeze because it increases extracellular water. That goes away with like an hour of movement, but it's something to keep in mind. This is not something that's super common at 4 IUs. Go beyond that, it gets a lot easier. Typically not chronic, it's acute, it's reversible, but you should know that. Next thing is insulin resistance. So if you have poor metabolic health, in the sense that your HbA1c is high, growth hormone will worsen insulin resistance. If you're already healthy, the marginal 0.2, 0.3% bump in HbA1c is nothing to worry about, but your circulating glucose levels gets higher while you're on growth hormone as well. That can increase diabetic risk if you're metabolically unhealthy. And high doses, I've beat this horse already. All the negative effects come at high doses. Before I get into myostatin, which is just 1 slide, dose timing. So in clomiphene and oral testosterone, take that first thing in the morning if you're going to do that drug. For oral anabolics, it's 1x per day. The half-life of these drugs vary, but that's, again, morning is generally the best time to take it. Time doesn't generally matter as much. Morning mimics natural cycles, but you take it once a day whenever you want.
Yeah.
Now, for testosterone, this is where complete divergence from what the bodybuilders do. Traditional bodybuilding protocols, you take testosterone Monday and Thursday. High dose, Monday gets you a bump. I think the half-life of testosterone, enanthate, and cypionate is like 6 days. So you get a bump of testosterone on first part of the week, you bump it up again second part of the week. This leads to peaks and troughs, right? They also typically inject in your muscles, which if you've ever injected something intramuscularly, if I inject testosterone in my quad, I can't train my quad for a week, which is kind of a waste, right? I can try to inject it in my glutes, but the risk of you bursting an artery or something is kind of like insane. And so the bodybuilder way of injecting testosterone is really just dumb because these guys are meatheads. What you can do instead is inject it right into your belly fat with a very fine needle subcutaneously. Same way you inject peptides. People think this is impossible, but I've done it many times. My entire 6-month cycle was daily subcutaneous injections. You don't get any risk of injury or scarring in your muscles. You get minor clots temporarily because the oil depot forms in your fat. That's where the testosterone is. It leaks into your bloodstream over 7 days. That is all going to go away over like the 1 month recovery period, basically. the risk of any scarring tissue or whatever on your fat cells happens with years of like piercing again and again and again, which is what happens with diabetics is they inject insulin all the time. So the way I would do it, you inject about up to 0.5 milliliters of subcutaneous oil into your belly fat every day. That way you get stable levels of testosterone throughout the entire week. And the concentration of testosterone should be lower than 200 milligrams per milliliter. If it's higher, what can happen is the oil disperses faster than the crystal, and the crystal gets stuck in your muscle or your fat, and that's going to be very painful. Wouldn't recommend that. So keep it below 200 milligrams of testosterone per milliliter. You do that, now you have stable levels throughout the entire week. There's no drop, peak type of issue there. Does that make sense? And then growth hormone, always take it nightly. So people in bodybuilding circles take morning and night. This is dumb. You are not getting any of the benefits of fasted growth hormone in the morning because it takes it's like a 6-hour cycle basically for it to enter your bloodstream and then do its thing. The only way growth hormone works in the morning is if you fast for 6 to 8 hours, which I don't recommend you do. Instead, it's better to take it at night. Growth hormone has done its work while you sleep, fasted. And then IGF-1, the FFA release, all that stuff persists into the morning, and you can just live your life the rest of the day and get the benefits. So I would only inject nightly, subcutaneously. It's a pretty small volume, but yeah.
Oh, yes.
Last thing on anabolics is myostatin. Coming soon. This is going to be the best drug class for women. I think myostatin inhibitors will be bigger than GLP-1s. I wrote an article on this on Twitter, which went fairly viral. It's on my X. I break down the recent trials on myostatin inhibitors. They work very well. They're being studied right now for combination therapy to prevent lean mass loss with GLP-1s. TBD on how safe they are in calorie surpluses to build muscle, but the drug class for muscle building drugs, in my view, has a larger TAM than GLP-1s. That's my view. Anyways, question before we end on this section.
So I have a question about IGF. So you mentioned that IGF helps like reduce the breakdown of muscle and promotes like fat breakdown more. Is there a specific body fat composition below which those effects really start to become beneficial? Because I think if you're like fat enough, your body will instinctively prefer to burn down fat, and only if you're lean enough, it will start burning.
We're going to cover what's called a Forbes curve at the end. So you're absolutely correct. That becomes something you want to think about when you're leaner. So below 20, 25% body fat, 20% probably, it's just easier for your body to burn lean mass. I've gone on calorie deficits where the worst was over fucking 5 months, I lost 20 pounds of lean mass and 1.5 pounds of fat with 5 months of strict training and dieting. Ended up in worse shape at the end of it, right? So that happens when you're at low body fat percentages if you don't monitor training and stuff. Growth hormone shines over there. But if you're obese, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Why is it that CME and with anabolic steroids kind of trash your lipids, but the growth hormone doesn't really seem to affect the fat weight?
I mean, growth hormone is going to increase FFAs, so it's increasing fat liberation from your fat. I don't think that translates to an increase in cholesterol. And I know the increase in lipids from testosterone has something to do with liver metabolism, I believe. But I will say that this happens more with oral steroids because the liver has to process them. But with injectables, the effect is very mild, like it's very tiny for most people. I don't think it affects it that much. I could be wrong, but yeah.
Yeah, there's some liver toxicity in the oral steroid.
It's with the oral steroids because the liver has to process the oral steroid to get it into the system. With the injectable path, it doesn't really happen. Testosterone isn't that bad for lipids. It's injectable. Yeah, it's like probably a mild elevation.
Step.
Does that answer your question, kind of? Okay.
I have one more. So you mentioned that you increase your testosterone level by 10x, right? So did the benefits scale? Obviously, you won't be 10x stronger, but what were the multiple of the benefits that you observed? Like, were you 2x stronger, 1.5x stronger? How did benefits do?
See my thread, I did an analysis of my stimulating training volume. So my company, Prana, we built a model that tells you exactly how much to train each muscle to stimulate growth. Part of that is quantifying how much of the volume you're doing in the gym is actually stimulating growth. I saw a 2 to 4x increase in stimulating volume on that dose of testosterone compared to 300 milligrams. That correlated with lean mass gains. The only caveat is that on 300 milligrams, I was on a deficit. On 500 milligrams, I was in a surplus. So I think the effects are going to scale roughly linearly. So are the side effects, right? Which is why if you want to go beyond that 500 milligram threshold, you replace with permobilan or masteron, which just gets you more anabolic, less androgenic side effects in the total dose. Makes sense?
I'm one more question about that. Yeah. Direct harmony. I heard about Tesla and Sherman. There's like claims around like decreasing visceral fat specifically. That also applies to like growth hormone as well.
Tesamorelin is specifically FDA approved for visceral fat reduction. If you ask me, I don't know why. The mechanism is not fresh in my mind. But if you have low visceral fat, doesn't really matter because it's going to target subcutaneous fat anyways. It seems to target visceral fat first. So if you have visceral fat, high visceral fat, it'll target that first. Then it'll target subcutaneous fat. But yeah, growth hormone has that same benefit. It's not just tesamorelin. If doctors could easily prescribe growth hormone, I think everyone would be taking it. But again, the medical system in this country is idiotic. Anyways, pillar 2, bone and connective tissue. Shortest section in this whole block. So, okay, what's the scope of this? Do you want superhuman bone density where you have adamantium bones like Wolverine, or do you just want high enough bone density and function? The answer is generally the latter. Superhuman bone density sounds pretty cool. Hard to get there. No real enhancement protocol to do that. The core scope of this is just to make sure your bone density is not a limiting factor to your functional capacity as you age. Same with joints, same with ligaments. As long as your bone density and your connective tissue is not a limiting factor to your performance as you age, you're good. Going beyond that sounds cool. It's exciting. I would love that. Unclear what the benefit would be other than being able to punch through a wall. There are some genetic deficiencies to get there. Unfortunately, no drug protocol does that safely, so I can't really help with that right now. That said, the way to do this is a little bit kind of a cop-out. So bone density takes years to increase, right? Muscle takes months to increase. Bone density, time horizon is way longer. You want to get a 5% bump in bone density, you're going to give 2 years of your life to that, right? And osteoporosis drugs work very well in osteoporosis patients. But for enhancements, the side effects are nasty. So it's like not anything you would ever take. The monoclonal antibodies around this, like never want to take it because it leaches calcium from other parts of the system to form bone. It's really only clinically appropriate in osteoporosis cases. And so with increasing bone density, the core way to do this is increasing mechanical tension. So by simple factor of resistance training and having higher muscle, your bone density will increase. The problem is it just takes years, not months. And so the protocol is the same as the muscle building protocol. Same exact thing. Resistance training with high load throughout your life. Resistance training is higher net ROI on health than cardiovascular training. Augment with growth hormone if you'd like. Wisely cycle anabolics and ensure you have enough nutrients and you're good. That's it. Now, some questionable choices, I don't want to go through these because it's kind of a waste of time, but that's really what's going to work. Everything else is kind of noise. There's one more thing that I can cover, which is nandrolone. This is a very powerful steroid. It's more powerful than testosterone. It will increase your bone density significantly. It will increase joint connective tissue healing, wound healing, and all that stuff pretty significantly over a cycle. The problem is it's so powerful that it's so suppressive to your natural testosterone production. It takes months to get off the drug because it takes months for your body to re-up testosterone production. So if you ever take nandrolone, it's going to work very well for bone density and bone regeneration and all that stuff. You're probably going to have to be lifelong on TRT, or you're just going to have to suffer for a few months. But that's like the one option I would say actually does work. It's just not a very safe protocol.
What should I do that?
Okay. Pillar 3, cardiovascular endurance. This is how you get big, strong, and fast.
Then move what?
Drugs here are riskier than steroids. Steroids are like pretty safe compared to these, just being clear. And the enhancement lever is to focus on for cardiovascular endurance is oxygen delivery. How well does your blood deliver oxygen to muscle tissue? And how well does the drug deliver oxygen to mitochondria? Second lever is mitochondrial volume density. So people think about mitochondrial density, which is how many mitochondria you have. What you really care about is mitochondrial volume density, which is on a slide, how much of your cell is mitochondrial tissue, not the amount or number, just like how big are the mitochondria and how much mitochondria are there. If you have higher mitochondrial volume density, better endurance capacity, better energy production, you are able to run faster, produce more energy. You will endure a lot better than the average person. So a sedentary person has a VO2 max of roughly 30 to 40. I forgot the units. It's just a little complicated. And then a trained individual is about 45 to 60. Elite level athletes are like 70 to 85 VO2 max. Their mitochondrial volume density scales from 3 to 5% all the way up to 10 to 12% of their cells. So an athlete has 10 to 12% of their cell volume being mitochondria. Again, function of bigger mitochondria and more mitochondria. And that's what translates to the increase in endurance capacity. And hemoglobin mass, which is what caters to oxygen delivery, 10 to 11 in a sedentary person, 14 to 16, I think numbers kilograms or something. I forgot the units on these. Grams per kilogram of body weight's the unit in an elite athlete. So if you want to optimize VO2 max, the two levers to pull to do that is increasing mitochondrial volume density to 10 to 12% of your cells and increasing the amount of hemoglobin in your blood to 14 to 16 grams per kilogram of body weight. How do you do this? Well, first, basic shit. Address any nutrient deficiencies you have in your body first. If you have low iron, if you have low ferritin, if you have anemia, low B12, low folate, if your hematocrit is very low or very high, you want to assess and take care of all of that first, because any enhancement protocol you run after that is going to be problematic. But the best drug to take once you do step 0 is as controlled as growth hormone is, which means a doctor cannot prescribe this to you, and the reasoning for why is incredibly stupid. Regulation has singled out growth hormone and EPO specifically from doctors to prescribe them for anything outside of their clinical indications. Testosterone you can prescribe to get jacked in some cases, right? EPO, growth hormone, if you want that, you're out of luck, effectively. It's a pain in the ass. But anyways, the purpose of erythropoietin is to increase your body's production of red blood cells. It targets bone marrow, they produce more red blood cells, you have more hemoglobin in your blood as a result. And this raises hemoglobin, this raises hematocrit, and by extension of that, this raises oxygen delivery. Oxygen delivery of oxygen from your blood into your muscles, so while you're training, you can produce way more force, way more output. This also mimics high amplitude environments. Amplitude training is like one of the best hacks to improve endurance. Go up to a mountain and train for 1 month. You will come back down as an athlete. Hard to do that. It's a very tough training, but erythropoietin mimics amplitude training because one of the adaptations of amplitude training is higher hemoglobin mass in your blood. The risk here is that it thickens your blood. So if you have too much hemoglobin, that can scale with hematocrit. Hematocrit's the effectively percentage of, I think there's an equation here I'll go into later, but as you get hematocrit above 54%, your risk of blood clotting increases and increases risk of stroke and a bunch of other things which you don't want. There's a way around that, but I'll get into it in a second. So EPO's endpoints, if you get your hematocrit up to about 50%, depending on your starting point, VO2 max typically rises by like 6 to 12%, again, depending on the starting point. And what you want is high hematocrit and high mean corpuscular volume. You can get a complete blood count. You'll see a marker called MCW. If you have a low MCV and high hematocrit, you have something called microcytosis, which is what I have, which is like these small red blood cells. Could look like you're an endurance athlete, but you really just have more red blood cells that are very small to compensate for the fact that your red blood cells are very small. I have this issue. It is what it is. And the general risk cutoff for hematocrit is about 54%. If you go above that, your risk of blood clotting and all that stuff increases. You want to stay below that as much as possible. The main biomarker, again, that we target with EPO is hemoglobin mass. That's the one correlate to all of these endurance benefits. More hemoglobin mass in your bloodstream, higher endurance. And the secondary benefit is increasing total blood volume. So across a bunch of different trials, if you have more blood volume, you endure more in running or cardiovascular training. Those are the two endpoints we target with EPO. By producing more hemoglobin, you produce increase in total blood volume, more nutrients in your blood and things of the sort, and your body can just deliver oxygen to your mitochondria as much as possible, which increases the capacity for every cycle of respiration you run, so you can run like an elite athlete. This is actually one of the more powerful drugs here, like, is very underrated. Most people don't know about it. Again, stupid medical regulation, but it's a phenomenal drug. Anyways, so how do you run EPO? So I forgot the exact dosing, ask Claude, but basically, you inject it, I believe it's a subcutaneous injection, daily or weekly, I forgot all that stuff. And what you want to do is you take it for a few months at a time, and you want to clinically monitor a bunch of different endpoints while you take it. First, again, hematocrit, proportional to RBC count and your MCV. Above 50% or 4%, risk plots increase. If HCT rises too much, what you can do to bring HCT down is increasing plasma volume.
Am I correct?
So in your blood, you have red blood cells and you have plasma volume. If you have more red blood cells, you have more HCT. If you compensate with higher plasma volume, you dilute the amount of red blood cells in your blood, which means you have more hemoglobin and you have more volume of total blood. That brings your hematocrit down and it allows you to run the protocol for longer without the risk of blood clotting.
I'll debate.
How do you do that? Well, Gatorade, electrolytes, tons of hydration, creatine, saunas, lots of carbs, and consistent training. If you do all that stuff, your total plasma volume will increase to the point that it compensates for the hematocrit elevation. You also need to monitor complete blood count monthly. Blood pressure can increase if your blood volume gets too high. That needs to be monitored as well. Red blood cell quality from a complete blood count, the widths, the volumes and all that stuff, reticulocyte count, all that stuff needs to be monitored as well, because if those go out of whack, again, things worsen. Iron status may worsen because as you produce more blood, you're leaching iron, and that can deplete the amount of iron in your bloodstream. And if you follow proper clinical monitoring for a few months, most of these risks can be mitigated. But again, you have to monitor your use of this drug.
What's up? Two questions, please. Everybody's talking about higher tuition backs. Is it causal relationship to health, or is it a correlate advance? With this, as you cycle off it, are you seeing creative maps that's fake, or is it just all an effect of the supplementation?
Second point, I'm going to answer in a question. VO2 max.
I think this is just going to be session with the video.
I didn't.
We're
Like
10
5
o'clock.
minutes ago.
We're 10 o'clock.
Should be next one.
So, like this, yeah, we're just one right on there. Like 5 minutes ago. Which is fine.
So I got to fuck off?
Previous one ran over
Did you
too.
in 5 minutes?
Can they postpone by 30 minutes?
Can you just like, we want to hear more.
Exactly.
Space.
I promise I'm more interested in the other motherfucker. Like, come on.
So just give me an idea how long you will be in the
30 minutes. Done.
30 minutes?
I don't know if we can do. I don't know if we can say 30 minutes.
Excuse me, the one that we're here for.
Okay, for the next one.
Maybe we could find like a space out there.
We could just walk the merge. Did you follow it?
Okay, we're going to do that. I'll leave in 5 minutes and I'm taking everyone with me.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, so
Okay. So VO2 max, great marker because you're measuring the compounding effect of,
what he said, Mark.
yeah, 5 minutes. Can you guys keep it down? I'll be out in 5 minutes.
Who's the next lead person? Adam. Oops. Hello.
Sorry to insult you. I was joking. I was joking. I didn't mean I was better than you.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, VO2 max is a great marker. Some people have problems with it because it's not very well.
Be quiet so we can talk. Sorry.
It's not very well measured in sedentary people because people don't train hard. It's hard to actually get to your VO2 max, but it's a great compounded marker for your ability of your blood to deliver oxygen to your cells, of cardiovascular health, of lipid health, of mitochondrial health. It's like compounds of all these things, right? So it's a very good thing to optimize. Really, if you don't want to test your VO2 max, that's fine. As long as you improve your endurance, it's going to be high no matter what. Because VO2 max testing is a bitch.
Right. Yeah.
The next thing is I'm going to answer your second question in a second. So why would you take it? So EPO's effects are temporary, right? You get the blood volume effect for a few months. When you go off, the blood volume effect goes away. And so that oxygen-mediated increase in VO2 max just dissipates. But the reason it's still valuable, and again, VO2 max doesn't have like a clean satellite cell equivalent. With muscle, you build muscle, you can build it back. The reason it's valuable is because when you combine this with a training protocol, you can radically improve your endurance capacity within a few months, and mitochondrial volume density, biogenesis increases, cardiovascular benefits, cognition benefits, all of those things persist when you're off the drug because you're really just accelerating the effects of training in a controlled cycle. So that's how you use it wisely. If you're going to sit on your ass and eat potato chips all day while you take EPO, you're just going to get a stroke. But if you exercise, it'll work. And then other notes, blood doping. This is when you take your blood, you remove all the hormones and everything, you cryopreserve it, then you inject it back into your bloodstream on race day. Works for about 4 weeks. Works very well. Same exact mechanism as EPO. EPO just allows you to just produce more blood naturally. It's the same benefit. So that's another thing if you might want to do if you are an athlete. I think Lance Armstrong does this. I hope he's doing okay. Rest in peace. I'm kidding, but he's alive, right? Yeah. And the other thing is that testosterone stimulates erythropoiesis as well. So it's not as powerful as erythropoietin, but testosterone increases hemoglobin mass as well, quite significantly. That's why bodybuilders look like tomatoes. And other AAS does this as well. So that's why for men, testosterone is the gold standard enhancement drug. Like it's just magic. It's great. Yeah. Anyways. Okay, protocol 2, I'll be done after these 2 slides. Mitochondrial volume density enhancers are the next thing to do. Drugs in this category will increase the amount of mitochondria you produce. They work incredibly well, like seriously well, but almost all of them cause cancer. No good. They do this by targeting PGC1 alpha by some upstream regulator. AMPK increases, PPAR delta, ERRA. You increase that, you increase PGC1 alpha, you have more mitochondria, and as a result, you produce more energy. So this also mimics high amplitude adaptations, because in high amplitude training, fuck you too, man. In high amplitude training, you get more mitochondrial volume density and blood volume. Again, the risk, it doesn't take in blood, that's a typo. Anyways, drug candidate. So the best thing is cardarine. This has never been studied in humans once, basically. It works very well. I've taken it, tripled my endurance in 2 weeks. Increases mitochondria by a lot. But the problem is, in mouse toxicology studies, it causes intestinal cancer. Very high doses over long durations, but we don't have the toxicology data in humans because it was abandoned. Athletes still take it. They seem to be fine, but cancer screening is terrible, so we have no idea what's going on. And it could just be because they're taking it orally, which targets the intestines versus injecting it. We don't know. But it works very well. There have been trials where humans take it over 3 months, seem fine, but we don't know. SR9009 and 9011, these are Rev-ERB agonists. They're wakefulness agents. They also produce more mitochondria through another pathway. Theoretically very effective, but again, similarly not very well studied. And the final thing is SLU-PB332, peptide, very popular these days with the tech pros. Wouldn't recommend you take it either because it's again very understudied. This category is very understudied, but it also works to increase mitochondrial biogenesis if you ever want to experiment with it. You also have MOTC, another one of those peptides. Again, very understudied, so I'm not going to go into it. Alcar, ACAR, activates AMPK around your entire body, so you get the benefits of metformin, but AMPK around your muscles as well. That'll work, but really the best drug in this list is cardarine. It's just like you're taking a risk, so be careful. And maybe don't even take it because you can get a lot of benefits with EPO itself. Okay. Quick bonus mentions, baking soda, beta-alanine, NAD, and supplements that can help you in the acute to improve endurance capacity. But the king is really altitude training. The drugs here are really just trying to mimic altitude training. So if you go into altitude in a mountain, you train for 4 weeks, you do some kung fu or some shit, you get very, 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 very fit. So maybe do that. Anyways, the last section, which we'll do outside, is getting lean. Not with just GLP-1s, because GLP-1s are just the starter. We're going to do it outside. Thank you so much, everybody.
I like to sound for heading to your little ass with live.
It is still high status.